What is going on, Badger fans? We got that dude, Curtis Holland, on the show who always brings his really good, interesting perspective. Maybe we got to step back from the ledge a little bit. That Bama loss was expected. They're really good. Let's talk about why. Let's talk about going forward with Braedyn Locke and kind of maybe take a bit of a state of the program. Locked on Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in as always. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. As always, appreciate every single person for tuning in. Always appreciate Curtis for jumping on. He's jumping on late for me because I'm out in Hawaii, so doubly appreciated. I'm going to send you something in the mail, my friend. But thank you so much for jumping on. I want to talk Bama. You want to talk Bama. I'm going to give you the floor. Are Badger fans overreacting to this loss?
So, it's interesting because going into this game, I think, I was on the live show and in the Discord, we were making predictions pregame. And kind of what I said is on paper, there's really no way we win this game. I don't see it. The lines of scrimmage are a mismatch on both sides of the ball. They have a significant amount of highly talented athletes. I believe even in the Dairy Raid earlier today, Ryan had mentioned that their linebackers are able to cover the routes of our slot receivers. And they were able to do that with just linebackers. That's how athletic they are. And so when you look at this game, it's a fundamental mismatch. And so I had made the prediction last week. I thought we were going to lose, 38-13. And, if you look at the game, we missed a field goal. They had a 3rd and 6 from, I think within our red zone that we had stopped, but there was a penalty and they ended up getting a first down, scoring a touchdown. They kick a field goal there. It's exactly 38-13. Bama's really good. There's no other way to explain that. When you look at the line of scrimmage, Brian Smith talks about this all the time. We have no one on the defensive side right now in our front seven that can stop that offensive attack. I mean, you have probably the largest and most athletic offensive line we'll see all season. You have the most athletic quarterback we're going to see all season with the ability to throw the biggest deep ball that we'll see all season. We have probably the most athletic and talented receiver core on that side of the ball that we'll see all season, except for maybe next week, I think, or in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Yeah, USC is right up there, but USC doesn't have Milroe. They don't have the running game. They don't have the same level of offensive line that we just saw, right? So this is by far, and then on top of that, to even add on to that, you have the probably best play caller in the sport at the moment in Kalen DeBoer, a coach who has a head coach, I believe, has lost a grand total of 13 games in his entire coaching career. So won 3 national championships at an NAIA level. I get it, lower level, but it's still 3 national championships. Was offensive coordinator in 2020 for Indiana when they almost beat Ohio State. They beat us in Camp Randall. Went to Fresno State, had them rolling before he went to Washington, brought them to a title in 2 years, a team that 3 years before that was 2-10, right? So DeBoer is the real deal. This team is the real deal. A lot of people are saying they fell off. It's hard to fall off when you have the single most talented roster in the history of the recruiting rankings and the best offensive play caller on a team that went to the playoffs last year. You just gotta be real about that. And so I think Badger fans are being a little overly negative for where this team is really at. We knew going into this was going to be a game that we really didn't stand a chance in. But there was a lot of things from this game that we liked. I think you saw that the defense was able to at times hold up and do a little bit better than maybe we had thought. Some of the plays that they had scored touchdowns on, specifically their deep route to Ryan Williams, that was a brilliant setup by DeBoer to isolate him on Delancey, which is probably not the match you want on Ryan Williams. Their tight end touchdown in the fourth quarter, in which they kind of took Miller out after that. Brilliantly designed play, had our defense in the blender. At that point, we were selling out to try to stop the run. We had a lot of one-on-ones, and we got Zachman ISO'd against 2 tight ends deep, and that was what resulted in the touchdown. And then finally, the touchdown before half, I get it, it's unacceptable. You need to win the 5 minutes before the half and the 5 minutes after half, and that's something we've struggled with. That's a different conversation. But when you look at what they did on that play, I believe it was, I don't know if it was Law or Prentice. It was one of the guys who had been there before. Got up to the top of his corner route on Hallman. You couldn't really see this in the TV copy, but in the stadium, you could see he sort of pushed off Hallman. What this did, it caused him to stumble, and he lost his shoe. And so in the TV copy, you see him just sort of chailing the receiver to the end zone. But really, he would actually making up a lot of ground, but it was already too late at that point. He wasn't going to catch him. If he gets off that clean, maybe he can make a pass deflection. Maybe he can be a little bit better on the ball. regardless, they scored a touchdown there. So those are 3 big plays. And then you look at their running game. Again, they washed our defensive line. They washed some of the issues there. But overall, I thought the effort from the defense was valiant. I thought you saw Nizer Forkreen step up, make some good plays. I thought overall, outside of some of those deeper plays, the secondary played well, right? And a lot of their long passes were set up due to play calling and just honestly due to great scheme by Alabama. So, again, when I look at this game, it's not great. But I think about a couple things that give me solace. One, we played Alabama in 2015. We lost to them 35-17. That score was incredibly misleading. The difference between that team and this team is that instead of trying to throw the ball and run a little bit more of an up-tempo offense, they were just giving the ball to Derrick Henry and taking the entire time off the play clock second half. Derrick Henry, 10 yards of carry, 11 yards of carry, actually. TJ Yeldon, 7 to 8 yards of carry. Right. And they just did whatever they wanted. It was an absolute dismantling of our defense. That team went on to win 10 games. Alabama's just a different breed. And this is a one-off. I said this before. Alabama's a one-off game. We're not going to see any team nearly as athletic, nearly as complete as that team, I think, the rest of the season.
Yeah, and you mentioned that a lot, right? The idea that this is almost a one-off. You're going to play the best team you're going to play this year. You're not going to match up well. And because you don't match up well, you're going to try to do things that put you in disadvantaged situations in other spots. Internally inside the game, there were moments because in the big picture, I agree with you. I thought Wisconsin would be 2-1. You thought Wisconsin would be 2-1. They're 2-1. I think Badger fans would say in the big picture, sure, if we had performed better week 1 and week 2 and then got blown out by Bama, it feels like there was struggles week 1, week 2, and then you got blown out. So it's hard to point to the positive, right? I think that's because if that former scenario played out. And you had showed you could dominate some of those lower level opponents, I think Badger fans would be more good with this.
Well, let me say it like this, because I think people have said that too. And then I have to ask, because, I look back at the last 10 years of Wisconsin football, and we have blown out lower level opponents, but we've also been blown out by our good opponents, right? We 2022, we beat New Mexico State 66-7.
Yes.
Did that make anybody feel better about when we went to the Horseshoe? Did that help anything? Did that change the tenor of that team? Right? We beat Illinois State 38-0 that year. Same thing that Iowa did to them this year. Does that make you feel better? Does that make you have more confidence just because you showed you could execute a system you've been running for 30 years? Does that make you feel better when you go to the Horseshoe and get embarrassed, where we never stood a chance in that game? Or when you bring in Illinois to home and you lose, 31-10, and Braylon Allen has 2 yards rushing? So that's why I look at that. I'm like, yeah, you wish you would have done better in those games. And I agree with that. I think there are some structural issues with this team that need to be addressed. But we lost to Alabama on the same lines of the things we struggled with in those games. We know what our problems are. And so when we play a team like that, that's where we're going to struggle. We're going to struggle to stop the run because we need more depth on the defensive line. We need we need better play from our linebackers. We're going to struggle there. But I think the bye comes at a really good time because you could tell from the press conference from Fickell that he was not happy with the team. And there may be some things behind that. I don't know. I'm not privy to any information there. It did seem like he was really frustrated with something. And I'm not sure. I mean, there's been a lot of speculation on that. I don't want to weigh in on that in any way. But I get the feeling that they're going to come out with a little bit more hair on fire for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I feel like, though, we've talked about that before, right? I feel like we've talked about even points in last year or this year, you're going to come out with a little more hair on your fire. We talked about that after week 1, saying going to South Dakota, you're going to come out now. That was not an acceptable performance. And then we talked about it. It feels like that idea is starting to wear a little bit thin. And maybe I'm wrong on that. I hear you. They should, and I agree with you completely. The bye week comes at a great time. And I'm not overly shook by the Bama loss. I'm really not. To me, it was more about – and you also brought up a really good point. That doesn't beating up on small, lower level teams, lesser components, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do better the rest of the year. But it does give you something you look at and say, okay, I feel better about taking on a Purdue then, or I feel better about taking on a Minnesota then, because we at least showed that we can dominate against teams we should dominate against. I don't know even know if we have that to point to right now.
Yeah, well, and I think, and I'm going to take something that I heard on the Buck Around podcast earlier today, in which they talked about, dominating opponents. It kind of feels like Fickell's going into these games with the idea of just winning the game, right? And now you can take that and put that how you want to put it. For example, we could have scored another touchdown against South Dakota, made it 34-13. I don't know if that really moves the needle at all with anybody, but, at the end of the day, it's like, I think he was going into a lot of those games with just the idea of winning the game. And quite frankly, and again, I'm not telling people how to fan about this. I'm not telling how to think about this. It's just my interpretation. I think that's going to be how we play a lot of our games this year. If we're winning games this year, it's going to be drag out fights. And I think that's what he wants until we can get to the point where we really are able to point to something on our offense or, in our defense that is really a strength of this team, and we can build off of that foundation. And so maybe that leads into some other talking points, but that's just kind of how I see it.
Yeah, no, I actually completely agree with you on that one. We did a show, Rajiv and I did a show the other day, and I said, this team's going to have to grind out games. They're going to win games similarly to the game script that Paul Chryst had to some degree, where I think they're going to run the ball. They're going to lean on teams. It's going to be conservative. And I don't think Fickle wants that. I think he feels like he's been backed in a corner, and that's the cards he has to play, unfortunately. And whether or not that's true or not, but I agree with you on that point. I think it's going to be a lot of grinding games this year. And I think they can win games like that. I really do when you look at some of the teams on the schedule. But when you play those types of games, you open yourselves up for opportunities for other teams to win those types of games too, right? That's just how those types of games play out. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. I want to talk kind of big picture about Curtis, what he thinks Braedyn Locke taking over for Tyler Van Dyke and how maybe that impacts his thoughts on this team. Because it's a big talking point going forward. Today's episode brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. I don't know about you, man. I put money on Wisconsin in this game because I bet with my heart, and I lost $7, but I did it over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the best place, America's #1 sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the LOCKEDON Podcast Network. And right now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket, so you can watch all the out-of-market NFL games on YouTube TV. With the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon game. All you need is a Google account, current YouTube TV account. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. To download America's #1 sportsbook, watch all the out-of-market NFL games over at FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Today's episode is also brought to you by our good friends over at Gametime. Listen, I have used this app. I've used this product. I love it. I was in a cab. We lost our tickets because the hookup we had failed us going to the Truist Park Braves Phillies. I got on my Gametime app, used my stuff, got tickets in the cab on the way to the game, emailed to me before we got there. It's incredible. It's awesome. It's the best ticketing platform in the world. This is what we're going to use to buy our Penn State tickets when we're going to the Penn State game. It's fast, easy. You get panoramic views of the seats before you sit down, so you know exactly what those sightlines are going to look like. Go over to Gametime. Get rid of the stress. Just get rid of the stress. Get the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create the account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. All right, let's get back into this. I got to ask you, Curtis, man. Braedyn Locke's taking over. Tyler Van Dyke's out. How does that impact you? How does it impact your confidence in this team?
Yeah, so me, last year, I think one of the first shows we ever did, I was the guy who was in the corner for Braedyn Locke. And I had said that, I don't even know if we need to bring in a transfer portal. I think we roll with him. We let him get all the reps and we let him take over the team, right? And then we brought in Tyler Van Dyke, and I was still saying, hey, Braedyn Locke in camp, he's showing these things. We need a quarterback that can come into the first game and be able to run the offense effectively at the highest level possible so that we don't have what we had the last few weeks, right? And then Tyler Van Dyke started really showing up, and he started doing a lot of good things. And so, we started talking about what he could do and what he could be for the team. I've never really given up on the potential that Braedyn Locke has. Now, I'm not of the illusion that he's going to be some guy that comes in and all of a sudden it's just an all-star quarterback's going to lead this team to 9 wins, right? What Braedyn Locke is he's a distributor, and he can be an elite distributor, right? And so essentially what do I mean by that? Well, he's a guy that if he's doing what his strength is, he's moving the offense. He's making the right reads. He's making the right throws. He's making the right plays. That's what his potential is, in my opinion. He's a little bit limited athletically. I don't think he would necessarily argue with that. But at the end of the day, he knows the offense inside and out. He knows it well. I haven't had a chance to fully look back at a lot of the film from last week. I have seen some Alabama edits of the film from last week in which they showcased a lot of what their D-line and were able to do against their offensive line. And let me tell you something. There's been some discourse about, he missed some open throws, and he definitely did. But it's one thing to say that, and it's one thing to say, well, we should have had our second string quarterback prepared, and it's abysmal the way he came in and didn't make those open reads. You get thrown into a game. This is the second time this happened to this dude. He gets thrown into a game versus Alabama, and at that point, human emotion takes over. You're playing what is probably the most athletic, physically dominant team you'll play all season, and probably your career. And there was a distinct rep I remember where, as soon as the ball was snapped, the defensive tackle literally punched Huber and threw him 3 yards into Nelson, right in front of Braedyn Locke's face immediately as he caught the ball. And, he backed up to throw it. And, of course, at that point, no one was open. because Alabama's corners were locked down. So then that's when he dropped the ball down. Now, you don't ever drop the ball down. But at that point, the only thing Braedyn Locke is able to do that I would tell him as coach is just tuck the ball on your chest and fall down, because there's nothing going to happen on that play. And that's the play he got jacked from behind because Nelson fell over and just crushed him from behind, right? So what can you do in that situation? Tuck the ball and hide, because there's nothing to do in that situation. That play was dead from the start, right? And when that happens, you're going to miss some throws that are probably easy throws that you can make in practice and you should make. But now we're talking live bullets against the best team. This game was built up as what could be one of the biggest home games in probably the last 10 years, right? Mm-hmm. And now you got to come in and you just watch your O-line get thrown aside like they're not even there. It's just not something that I expect him to come in and all of a sudden take over a game. That's just not going to happen. But then you saw some.
Can I interject there, though? Can I interject there really quickly? Because for the most part, I agree with you on this. We were on the Discord going back and forth. I agree with broadly most of your Alabama post takeaways here. I do expect a guy who his calling card is intangibles. His calling card is knowing the offense. His calling card is being a good fit for this offense. I absolutely, you're dead accurate. He came in the middle of a game against Iowa and Bama. That's really hard. There's still moments where you got to know you can't hold the ball 5 seconds. Like that one where he kept rolling out to the right, You got to protect the ball. He had 2 fumbles in the pocket. One of those I don't put on him because Nelson got beat like a drummer. I can't remember if it was Nelson or Malman. That might have been Malman coming around the edge. There were moments where he had 2 receivers that were open deep, and it just throws you kind of have to probably hit. I am okay with some of it because it is an incredibly hard spot to be thrown into, and he hasn't been getting number 1 reps. He isn't fully prepared. It is Alabama. There's also moments where I thought he looked like a freshman, and that's not his calling card. His calling card is, we talked about it. Like one of the things we talked about was how nice it would be to have a backup quarterback that you felt comfortable being able to come in right away and play, because he would be that type of guy that would be prepared. I thought that was a little lacking. The awareness, the preparation.
My only pushback on that is, and I will say that it's not like he played the best game ever. And I'm not trying to say, I'm not covering for all his mistakes. I'm just giving you some framework as to think about it, because again, I think he's being unfairly maligned for doing what, quite frankly, a lot of quarterbacks do against Alabama.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I look back at our team, and I'll just use our teams for example, because those are the ones I know the best. What team in the last 10 years can pull in a backup quarterback and have any success against a team like that? Maybe Arch Manning at Texas can do that.
It's from Ohio State when like Cardell Jones is their 3rd string quarterback.
Exactly, like a team. And again, I don't think we're near the level of Ohio State, right? And I don't think we're Texas. I don't think we're any of those teams. I mean, you see what Michigan's doing. Michigan's quarterback is somehow worse than all of our quarterbacks. I don't know how that happened, but it did. So could he have played better? Is there throws he could have made? Yeah, sure. There definitely are. And so when I look at this game, again, I don't look at this like this is an indictment on Braedyn Locke, because it's not to me. Like, this is an indictment on our whole team. And it's just not at the level that Alabama's at. And so, you don't have a quarterback play the game by himself. Okay. He's running from, again, what is probably the most athletic defensive line. I don't think we'll play a better defensive line or more talented defensive line all season. I mean, I watched Oregon against Idaho and Boise State. Whatever they're supposed to have on the D line, it's not showing up like that. So, that's where I'm like, again, what would this be? Probably his 5th game. He's played Iowa. He's played Ohio State. He's played Illinois with NFL D tackles. And then Indiana, which was a game that, quite frankly, the whole team quit on that game. Mm-hmm. And then you get thrown in against Alabama. I mean, this kid has had no breaks at all. And I think to the point where he was holding on to the ball a long time, you got to have the time in your head. That's absolutely true. But it's a young kid trying to make a play in a game where we're behind. And we got to make plays in order to win. And so, do I fault him for that? A little bit, because he needs to have better awareness, and he should have better awareness. But at the end of the day, is he going to do better or worse than anybody else we could put in or anybody else there? No. I mean, it is what it is. So the one thing I will say about those open guys that he missed, the difference between him and Tyler Van Dyke for the first 2 games, and we had the all-22 on the first 2. Mm-hmm. Those guys were open in those games too, and Tyler Van Dyke didn't even look at them. They weren't even in the ballpark. Right. And so that's where I'm like, okay, yeah, but at least he threw it at them. Now he missed, but he threw it at them. He knew they were there and he knew where to go with the football. And that's something that I hope they can rectify in camp, or in the next couple of weeks. We have a bye. Now he's practicing with the ones. I don't know how much practice he got with the ones last week. Quite frankly, I don't know how much practice they tried to give him with the ones, because you built your whole game plan on utilizing Tyler Van Dyke to beat Alabama. Now that you could say you live and die by that sword, but that's probably what they did. So, now he comes in, he's off, his timing's not there, and he made some bad plays. So, at the end of the day, I'm not saying the book's out on him. I think what his strength is being a distributor. He can be the guy who can keep the offense moving, who can get the ball to the right spots when guys are open. And there will be times where guys are open. Case in point, this last weekend, guys were open. So, can he do that? I don't know. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. But if he is to reach what I think his potential is, that's how he's going to have to play.
I'll say this. I think he's a better fit for – and this is not necessarily the greatest thing, but he's a better fit for what we've seen the offense wanting to do for the first couple of weeks. I think he's a better fit for being that distributor, that point guard than Van Dyke is. I think he'll be more patient in that role. You do lose some mobility, right? Like we saw like some of that RPO action, you do lose some of that, unfortunately. And I think you'll see less of that in the game plan going forward. That was going to be a big part of the Bama game. Like they saw what USF did to them. You saw 2 scrambles in that early going for Tyler Van Dyke. Like that was going to be a big part of it. I think a lot of that is out of the offense going forward. He'll still be there to keep defenses honest, but they're not going to.
Yeah, and I think it will probably be less of a focus. But the one thing that is true is that there were looks in the RPO game. I mean, he did that against Ohio State. He ran for like 30 yards because they just said, hey, he's not going to run. And then he did, and he got 30 yards, right? And so, there's going to be looks like that. There were looks like that on Saturday. He never kept the ball. I think that was one criticism I would have had of him is he should have kept the ball on a couple of different reads. And he would have had a shot because literally no one gave him anything. No one was even close to trying to cover him. So he would have had some yards, right? And so that's something that I hope, they coach out of him or they coach him to do moving forward. Just to your point, to keep the defense honest. Because the defenses are like us, they're going to say he's not going to run.
Well, let me ask you this, though. Can you afford to even do that right now with Mabry as the backup? Like I don't think you want him running much anyway, because if Mabry's not ready, I know a lot of fans are asking Mabry, put him in. He's 6'4", he has a good arm. Man, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because I think, if you when they showed the replay of how Van Dyke got injured, it was kind of a freak injury. I mean, and you could see his knee pop. I know there were some fans who were like, "Oh, I don't even know how he got injured." It's like, well, did you watch it? Because his knee like popped out, like you could see it. Yep. I don't know what the mystery was there, but I think that's the risk you have. But at the same time, I mean, it's football. You're going to have that risk, and I think you have to do the things that allow you to win. And like at the end of the day, it's like if you play to not get hurt, you'll probably end up getting hurt. Every football player I've ever had in my life that my dad played football here, my grandpa played football here, my uncle played football here. I grew up around this whole program. Every single one of them, if you run trying not to get hurt, that's exactly when you get hurt. And so if you play trying to not get hurt, that's exactly when you get hurt, right? And so that's where I look at that and I say you got to run the play that's there. You got to run the offense. And if they run it right, he should be able to get 5-10 yards and slide, and so that's what the look is. Now, how much we use that, I definitely think it'll be less than we would have with Tyler Van Dyke, because I do think that isn't his strength. Going off of more of what I think Locke is capable of, that I think we missed a little bit with Tyler Van Dyke. So we had sort of switched to Tyler wanted to go with Tyler because he opened up that deep ball. Well, Tyler hasn't he's taken like 2 deep shots all season.
Man.
I think what Locke actually does is open up the intermediate pass a little bit more than what Tyler Van Dyke had. And I think that can be just as effective as a deep ball, because if you can hit the deep dig routes, if you can hit the gap in the seam, if you can hit the wheel routes on the sides, that can be just as effective at moving the sticks, and those can generate big plays. And then the defense does have to back up a little bit, does have to respect that a little bit more, and opens up the run game, right? And so, I think that there's pros and cons to this, but the one thing, and I think I told you this on Friday, the one thing I saw from Locke is he took more of those deeper shots. Even though he's not the guy that's supposed to take the deep ball shot, he's taken more of those shots. So how does he affect the team moving forward? Honestly, I think it's about the same. I mean, there was a reason they were in a competition up until the second week of camp. I don't think there's too much drop off, especially seeing how Tyler's been playing so far this season. I don't think you're really going to, because there's more issues than just the quarterback on this team. So I don't think you're going to see a substantial drop off than what you would have had otherwise.
Yeah, I want to get into that in one more segment. Let's take one more quick break for the friends of the show. And then I want to keep talking about Curtis here. I like having Curtis on because he has a really analytical approach to what we're doing here, and I appreciate that. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends of the show, new friends of the show over at Roy. Listen, if you want to jump in the NIL game yourself as a fan, Roy is here for you. It stands on return on you. It is a new platform that lets fans get involved in NIL like never before, but making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. So you can contribute to Will Palming. You can contribute to Tackett Curtis, whether it's trying to make sure he stays within the program or it's rewarding him for a big game. And with this, they are able to generate exclusive content for the people that contribute to them. By supporting the players directly, you can help shape the roster, retain talent, and keep the favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. As you all know, NIL has changed the game forever for athletes. Roy changes the NIL game for fans. Directly support players, exclusive content, no risk contributions. Fans' contributions are securely held and only distributed if the athlete makes a decision that aligns with the fans' support. It's a game changer. It's completely different. Engage with athletes on their NIL journey. Get into the game with Roy. Use our code LOCKEDON and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes for $5,000. Let's get back into this conversation. Get Tackett Curtis.
Yeah, that's been messing with me a little bit the last few weeks. People saying Curtis by his last name, and I'm like, what? I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're. Yeah.
Let me just see this, because I agree with you on the idea that I don't want Locke playing not to get hurt. I just think you're going to put him in less situations. I think we're saying kind of the same type thing.
Yeah.
Where you're not going to use.
For sure. It's not going to be a feature of the offense anymore. That's for sure.
What's the thing that you're most sure of? I asked this to a couple other people the other day. Like, what do you know about this team? Like, in a good way, what are you really confident about this team? Because you're right, this bye week comes in a great spot. Like, USC is a good team. They're not Alabama. You get 2 weeks to prepare. You get 2 weeks to get Braedyn Locke ready. What are you really confident in this team right now?
So, when I look at what this team is, I think what I'm most confident in is the youth on this team. And I'm most confident in the direction that the recruiting's going. You've had how many conversations with Brian Smith? I mean, the number one things he talks about, you need to get D linemen, you need to get wide receivers, right? And I will say that our wide receiver recruiting has been a little bit lacking, although I do like Eugene Hilton a lot. I do like Keon Barry Johnson a lot. I do like Cam Miller. I think Cam Miller is going to be a stud. I honestly think you need to play him more on the outside, just based on how he plays, because I don't know. We have a lot of guys that can play slot really well. I don't know if you need to put him there. He creates a lot of separation, gets upfield really fast. I think that's kind of where you kind of play him like an Olave. Actually, that was the scout on him. He was a lot like Olave was at Ohio State, right? And so, that's how I want to play him. But you look at what we're doing in recruiting, and the big thing is defensive front, right? Well, when you look at what this team's biggest weakness is defensive front, and that doesn't change overnight unless you want to spend however much money in NIL. And that's just kind of the reality of that situation. I think we have right now, 8-9 defensive linemen total on this team. Would you say?
It's 8 or 9, depending on how you classify Willard.
Exactly. So, and this past year, the freshmen who would be true freshmen this year, you got Willer, you got Weber, you got Dylan Johnson. Those are all the freshmen that were brought in. Now, I feel like I'm missing someone. Am I?
No, those are the freshmen.
We did bring in Lane, who is going to be coming back next year. And then we brought in Hills as well. So that's 5. They brought in 5 guys in the portal too, or in this class, I guess you could say, to address that. Next year, you're bringing in Xavier Kwanu, who's exactly the type of guy we needed yesterday versus Alabama. You're bringing in not Ernest Willer. Why can't I think of people's names right now? Wilson Telemaque, right? You're bringing in Petway, hand on the ground guy. You also got Clayton, who's another guy who can put his hand on the ground. And then you got Lateju, who I think is a Swiss Army knife. You can put him on the outside, you can put him on the inside. So that's in 2 classes. We brought in 10 people, and I highly doubt we're done. I think we're bringing in more transfers next year as well. I mean, just like that, you went from 2022 to 2020, I guess 4 and 5 next year with another 10 plus guys. And I don't think they're stopping there. I think they're going to continue to do that. I think they have to continue to do that. Right. And so that's how you revamp a team. But even if we bring in all those guys, everybody stays, we bring in a couple more transfers, that's still with Dylan Johnson, Willer, all those guys being redshirt freshmen or sophomores, and then the new guys being true freshmen. They're not going to be ready next year. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So it's going to take time to get to the point where we can send up to an Alabama line with really good athletes, really elite athletes, really good talent. And that's why I'm confident in that moving forward. I know some people are a little bit, more pessimistic on, maybe we'll lose some things from an NIL, transfer portal, all that stuff. I think that's yet to be seen. One thing I found that it's very hard to leave Madison. Madison has an allure that's different than a lot of colleges. I mean, there are players on this team who took less NIL money just to come here, quite frankly, or other schools who have to offer more because their school, no offense, is not fun. And that's just kind of, kind of the reality of it. So, I mean, I think there's an allure here. I think what Fickell is probably telling the team, or at least if I was him, what I'd be telling the young guys is, hey, you're the vanguard of what we're trying to build here. And it's going to be a long road. It's going to be a tough road, but if you stick it out, it's going to be worth it. And that's how you get to that next level. And that's what I think the pitch is. So I don't think anybody on that team is sitting here like, oh man, we didn't play well in our first 2 games. We struggled against Bama, man. I don't know if I'm feeling this team anymore. No, I think they know where they're at. I think they recognize that. But going back to what I feel confident, and I feel confident in the youth. I feel like when you see the youth come in, you see a little bit of a spark. You see a little twitch of athleticism that maybe wasn't all the way there before. You see what the potential of this team could be moving forward.
Yeah, I love that one. That's one I'd highlight too. I think you're already seeing it. You're seeing Lucas in spurts. You're seeing Haywood with the ones. You're seeing the 2 freshman running backs. I know this staff loves Heiberger. That's not hyperbole. They're super high on him. He'd already be playing if he hadn't got hurt. I think Lafayette is a future star, at least as a situational pass rusher edge guy. I love Leteju. Absolutely love that dude. So I think you're right there. I think the question and the concern becomes long-term, what's the offense? Whether that's Longo, can we find the quarterback, right? Because none of that defensive line talent, which is needed, matters if you can't finally figure out the quarterback spot, which has been a bugaboo for years. And then how do you keep people interested, invested if it is a 2 or 3 year thing? Because next year is going to be brutal. Like, you're losing a lot of established players off this team, another tough schedule. Does that pitch that it's going to be a couple years start to get difficult to sell? Maybe not as much.
Well, I definitely think it's difficult to most of the fans, based on what I know from inside the athletic department and with a lot of the other boosters. They want to see some progress too, but I think they understand that it's going to take some time. I think that was the message that was pitched to them when they made the Luke Fickell hire, that it was going to probably take a little bit of time to get to where they need to get to. And that's not always stuff that people are going to talk about on the interwebs, or it's going to be talked about by Luke Fickell in a press conference, because you're not going to pitch it like that. I know some people are upset because they feel like they've been lied to about all this team's going to compete for championships and things like that. It's like, well, what is the media department supposed to tell you? That we're going to be mid for the next 3 years? Like, that's not going to get people excited. Like, I mean? Like, it's like, what are you supposed to tell them? Like, so, and I think there's an element of, I think this staff maybe overvalued some things, or maybe made some assessments that were erroneous. And so those are things that are going to have to be, sorted through over this season and in the next year. There's some questions that I have with both coordinators, and even the defensive structure as a whole, which a lot of that falls on Fickell, and there's some questions that I have with Longo in terms of, some of the way that the offense works. Sometimes having, for example, Locke, you can't move, but he has no outlet, so it's like things like that, where it's like just little questions that need to get rectified. And then, how much cohesion is there in the staff right now? I mean, it's tough to say. Everybody's asking questions right now about that. I don't know what the truth is. The only people that know that are inside the building. And if there is some lack of cohesion, those are things that will need to be addressed one way or another. Because if there is that, you're never going to have a team that's successful. Why I still have faith in Fickell is that he's made the moves he's had to make in the past. He's adjusted and adapted every year. His teams have gotten better over the course of the year, each year. So I still have a lot of faith that they can do that. I think there's a lot more meat left on the bone with this team. I don't think we've seen the best version of this team yet. And I don't know if the best players on this team have been really featured in a way that allows them to succeed yet. So I think there's a lot more to come with this team. I think there's a better version of this team down the road. And then just to take a step back, look at the conference right now. A lot of people are super high on Nebraska. They're a great team this year. I definitely think they're making a bowl. But all they've done is beat UTEP, beat a Colorado who has no kind of defense and no kind of offensive line. They just dropped 8 and got pressure with 3 people the whole game. You're not going to be able to do that against pretty much any team you play. They beat a university in Northern Illinois, or Northern Iowa. Cool. Dylan Raiola is not perfect. No. Little mini Mahomes. He's not Mahomes yet. He makes good plays. He's a better quarterback than they've had. Not really a high bar. You look at a team like Purdue. They just got blown out by Notre Dame, and Rutgers is a good team. They're going to be a tough challenge for sure. But that is a team that on paper we have better athletes than. So I think we can compete with that team. There's no reason I don't think we can't win that game. But they're going to be definitely a challenge for us. Northwestern, I think you can beat that game. You beat that team. Iowa's the same Iowa it's always been. That's just going to be what it is. I think they're a little bit better on offense, but we'll see how they play against Minnesota this week. Nothing that they have done is earth shattering. You look at Penn State, their offensive line through the first 2 weeks has been abysmal. Their defense has let up way too much for what it is. That West Virginia win is looking worse and worse each week. You look at a team like in Oregon, they've struggled. I think they're starting to get it together, though. That's still going to be a really, really tough team. And Minnesota, you'll never hear me say anything nice about Minnesota on this thing other than I do think maroon is a nice color. But other than that, I don't see anything positive. Then the next game on the schedule, USC. I look at what they did against LSU. LSU didn't stress them on the line of scrimmage, and LSU hasn't stressed anybody on the line of scrimmage this year, right? I mean, they almost lost to South Carolina. South Carolina put up more points than USC did. I mean, will the real USC please stand up? I mean, we put up about the same amount of points on that LSU defense last year with Tanner Mordecai, and we only lost because they had 2 NFL receivers play half the game. So, at the end of the day, So at the end of the day, it's like, I think USC is a good team. And I do think that, going into next week, I'm curious to see how they play against Michigan, because that to me is more of a litmus test, just because Michigan on the line of scrimmage, I think is a better team than LSU was. They have no semblance of an offense this year, but they can still run the ball, and I think they'll play good defense. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. But, at the end of the day, for me, I think going back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast, this is a team that's going to have to grind out a bunch of wins. Whether or not you're happy with the results of the first 2 weeks, we went into that fourth quarter and we ground out those wins. And there was a lot of grit there. The third quarter against Alabama, I didn't see any quit. And that was something I was looking for. Is this team going to quit? They didn't quit. They went and had a 17-play drive to score, cut the lead 28-10. Now, it didn't really matter because Alabama turned around and just decided, okay, we have 4- and 5-star guys everywhere. Let's just give the ball to the 4- and 5-star guys everywhere and go down the field and score again. But it wasn't for a lack of effort. And that's what you really want to see. And that's what still encourages me about this team, is that I didn't see him quit.
Yeah, I think that's dead on. I agree. I didn't see quit either. I thought there was a lot of moments in that game, a couple third downs where they forced, 3 and outs. They forced the punt. They held them to a field goal. They stood up. But eventually, playing Bama, it's like holding back a raging river with a dam that's not strong enough. And you just keep plugging holes. Eventually,
think about it like this. The best running back on the field was Jalen Milroe, and he was playing
he's incredible.
So it's like, we're not going to see that the rest of this year.
He is Curtis Holland. I am Ryan Herrings. This is Locked On Badgers. Appreciate everybody tuning in. As always, man, I love it when Curtis comes on. I think we get smarter when you come on the show, man. I love the perspective, and I love the way you think of the game and the way you describe it and explain it. So, as always, appreciate you. Keep the hopes up, Badger fans. This is a great week for a bye on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.